The smell of barbecue smoke usually meant summer joy, but today, it reeked of betrayal. Jake's hands shook as he spotted his neighbor Karen's backyard party. There, tied next to a chef's knife, trembled Marshmallow, his baby goat stolen, and minutes away from becoming the star of Karen's live-streamed dinner. Jake had 60 minutes to save him, but Karen wasn't just a thief. She was a master manipulator with a wine glass in one hand and a smirk on her face. "Your goat's about to make me famous," she taunted. Jake's mind raced. He'd raised Marshmallow from birth, nursed him through storms, and built him a playground. Now he'd either outsmart Karen or watch his best friend sizzle on her grill. With the clock ticking and Karen's guests clinking glasses, Jake made his move. But one wrong step, and Marshmallow, and his entire life, would go up in smoke. The smell of barbecue smoke drifted through the air, a thick, mouth-watering scent that would have made any normal person's stomach growl. But for Jake, it sent a jolt of panic through his chest. He wasn't hungry, he was terrified. He knew that somewhere in the middle of all that delicious grilling was something that should not be there. Something with 4 tiny hooves, a fluffy white coat, and the most innocent, big-eyed stare. Marshmallow, his baby goat, had been safe in his pen just this morning, happily chewing on a piece of old rope like it was the greatest treasure on earth. Now he was gone. There were no broken locks, no tracks leading into the woods, no sign of a struggle. He was just gone. Jake had searched the entire farm, checked every corner of the barn, and even crawled under his truck in case the little troublemaker had decided to take a nap in the shade. But deep down, he knew this wasn't an accident. Someone had taken him. Then Mr. Henderson, his ever-watchful, always nosy neighbor, appeared at the fence, chewing on a toothpick like he was the bearer of some deep, ancient wisdom. "Saw your fancy little," he said. Karen was carrying him like a sack of potatoes. Looked real pleased with herself, too. Jake's stomach dropped. Karen. The name hit him like a sucker punch. Her smug face flashed in his mind, the same smirk she'd worn while reporting his rooster to the cops. This wasn't just theft, it was war. She was his neighbor nemesis, the self-proclaimed queen of the cul-de-sac, who had once tried to shut down his entire farm for driving down property values. Now, as Jake peered over the ridiculously high wooden fence that separated his property from Karen's, his worst fears were confirmed. There, right next to her overpriced outdoor kitchen setup, tied to a metal post like some kind of farmyard decoration, was Marshmallow. The little goat looked confused but unharmed, occasionally letting out a small, nervous bleat. And just a few feet away, Karen and her overly dressed guests clinked glasses of wine, laughing as a chef in a ridiculous white hat flipped something over a sizzling grill. Jake's heart pounded. He had to get Marshmallow out of there now. But as he gripped the top of the fence, ready to hoist himself over, a shrill voice sliced through the air. Well, if it isn't Farmer J. Karen stood there, a smug smile stretched across her perfectly lipsticked face. She held a glass of wine in one hand, the other perched on her hip like she had just won some kind of neighborhood dispute. "I was wondering when you'd show up," she said. Jake clenched his fists, trying to keep his temper in check. "Untie him. Now." Karen laughed, flicking Marshmallow's leash. "Or what? Your rooster'll arrest me? For your information, I found him wandering near the road. Thought I'd save him before he got hurt." "That's funny," Jake shot back, "because my fence is still locked, and my cameras didn't pick up any wandering." Karen waved a dismissive hand. "Technicalities. Anyway, you should be grateful. We're throwing a beautiful little barbecue, and I figured he'd make a wonderful addition." Jake's stomach twisted. She leaned in, her voice syrupy with malice. "Imagine the headlines. Local chef's secret recipe, fresh, farm-raised. Your goat's about to make me famous." Marshmallow let out another nervous bleat, as if he understood exactly what she meant. Jake could feel his pulse in his ears. He was going to lose it. He was going to grab that wine glass out of her hand and dump it straight over her head. But no, that wouldn't help. He needed a plan. Taking a deep breath, he forced a calm he definitely did not. "Karen, let's be reasonable. That goat belongs to me. You can't just steal him." "Oh, please," she interrupted, taking a slow sip of her wine. "It's just a goat." Jake's vision blurred with rage. Just a goat? Just a goat? He had raised Marshmallow from the moment he was born, stayed up all night during a storm when the little guy got sick. He had built him his own personal play structure, complete with ramps and a tiny slide. This wasn't just a goat. This was his family. Karen smirked. "Look, you're welcome to stay. We've got plenty of food. You might even enjoy it." Jake inhaled sharply, forcing himself to think. Storming in and grabbing Marshmallow wasn't an option. Karen would call the cops in a heartbeat and somehow make herself the victim. No, he needed something better. Then, like a gift from the heavens, he spotted something in the corner of Karen's backyard, a decorative sign perched on a table, proudly displaying a QR code. "Follow my exclusive barbecue experience on social media," it read. Jake's mind started spinning. Karen loved attention, she lived for it. The plan crystallized, a risk that could bury Karen forever, or blow up in his face. But the clock was ticking. Marshmallow's leash inched closer to the grill. He took a step back, forcing a slow smirk onto his face. "You know what, Karen? You're right. Maybe I am overreacting." Her eyes narrowed. "Oh, I mean," he said, crossing his arms, "if this is such a high-class event, I should be honored that my goat is the star of the show. I bet your online followers would love to see this." Karen's smirk widened. "Obviously. I have some very important people." "Perfect," Jake said, pulling out his phone. "That's exactly what I needed to hear." He scanned the QR code, quickly finding her live stream. As expected, she was bragging about her fresh, organic, locally sourced meal. The chat was full of comments, people asking about the food, setting recipes. Jake didn't hesitate. He took a screenshot of Marshmallow, still tied up, and uploaded it to every local group he could find. Breaking: Karen from Maple Street stole my baby goat and is about to cook him live on camera. Somebody stop this madness. Then he pulled up his contacts and made 2 quick calls. The first was to a local animal rights group that took issues like this very seriously. The second was to the cops because, unlike Karen, he actually had proof of theft. Karen was still obliviously gloating when he put his "You know," Jake said, barely containing his grin, "I think this is going to be your most popular barbecue yet." Karen had no idea what was coming. As she sipped her wine, blissfully unaware of the chaos that was about to unfold, Jake leaned against the fence, watching everything like a man who had just set the world's most satisfying trap. The live stream was still running, and within minutes the comments section was on fire. Messages flooded in, ranging from confused onlookers wondering if this was a joke to full-blown outrage from animal lovers who were already tagging authorities. But Jake wasn't going to leave everything to chance. He needed to make sure this disaster hit Karen in the most spectacular way possible. That was where Lisa and Timmy came. Lisa, his childhood best friend and an expert in stirring up trouble when necessary, had already been briefed. She was currently marching up Karen's driveway, holding a tray of what she called organic artisan lemonade. But what Jake knew was actually the most disgusting, sour, undrinkable liquid she could create. Her job was to distract Karen just long enough for Jake to get into the yard. Meanwhile, Timmy, Lisa's 12-year-old menace of a brother, was positioned behind a row of bushes, armed with a slingshot and a bag of marshmallows. Because if anyone was going to defend a goat named Marshmallow, it might as well be literal marshmallows. His mission was simple, cause chaos the moment Lisa rang the doorbell. Jake slipped through the side gate, careful to stay low. Karen's guests were too busy mingling to notice him. Marshmallow was still tied up, looking utterly unimpressed with the entire situation. Jake crept toward him, whispering, "All right, buddy, let's get you out of here before you become someone's main course." Then, right on cue, Lisa's voice rang out from the front. "Good evening, everyone. Would you like to try some hand-squeezed, ethically sourced, farm-fresh lemonade?" Karen, who was bragging about her party's exclusivity, turned around with an irritated sigh. "Ugh, are you seriously selling drinks right now?" Lisa beamed, completely unfazed. "Oh, absolutely. And let me tell you, it's so exclusive that only the most refined palates will appreciate." Karen, whose entire personality revolved around being considered refined, sniffed. "I suppose I could try a sip." Lisa handed her a cup with an innocent smile. The second the liquid hit Karen's tongue, she made a sound that could only be described as a dying cat attempting opera. She spat it out all over her expensive outdoor furniture, clutching her throat. "What is this? Are you trying to poison me?" Lisa gasped in mock horror. "Oh no, that was my extra bold batch. You must have a very sensitive palate." As Karen gagged and scrambled for a napkin, Timmy made his move from his hiding spot. He pulled back his slingshot and let a marshmallow fly. It arced beautifully through the air and smacked one of Karen's guests right in the forehead mid-sip of his wine. The man choked in surprise, spilling red liquid all over his white blazer. Before he could even react, another marshmallow struck the back of Karen's head, sticking to her perfectly styled blonde bob. She shrieked, spinning in confusion. By the time the third marshmallow launched, pure anarchy had broken loose. Karen's guests, now thoroughly rattled, were scrambling to dodge the unexpected sugary assault. In the middle of it all, Lisa kept apologizing while slyly blocking Karen's path back to the backyard. Jake took his chance. He quickly untied Marshmallow, scooping the little goat into his arms. "All right, buddy, we're making a run for it." But just as he turned to leave, a voice stopped him cold. "Do you think you're going?" Karen had somehow managed to escape Lisa's diversion. Her face was still twisted in fury from the lemonade fiasco and the marshmallow attack. Her eyes locked onto Marshmallow, and Jake could see the realization dawning on her face. "You think you can just back?" she snapped. Jake didn't flinch. "You mean take back the animal you stole from me?" "Yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing." Karen let out a dramatic scoff. "Oh, please, this is ridiculous. You're making such a scene over a stupid farm animal. Do you know how much effort I put into planning this event? The influencers I invited? The reputation I—" Jake gave her a slow, unimpressed nod. "Yeah, you built yourself a real empire here, Karen. Too bad it's about to collapse." Before she could ask what he meant, a new sound cut through the madness, the distant wail of sirens. Karen's smug expression faltered. She glanced around as if trying to figure out whether this was some kind of prank. Then one of her guests, still holding their phone, gasped, Karen, your live stream is blowing up, and not in a good way." Jake smirked. "Yeah, funny thing about broadcasting your crimes to the entire town. People tend to react." Karen lunged toward him, but before she could get her hands anywhere near Marshmallow, the front gate swung open. A squad car pulled into the driveway, followed closely by an animal control van and, to Karen's absolute horror, a small group of very angry protesters holding signs that read, "Save the Goat," and "Justice for Marshmallow." One of the officers stepped out, looking thoroughly unimpressed. Karen plastered on her best innocent smile. "Oh, officer, what a lovely surprise. We're just having a little neighborhood—" The officer cut her off. "We received multiple reports about a stolen animal and possible animal cruelty." He glanced at Jake, who was still holding Marshmallow. "Sir, is this your goat?" Jake nodded. "Yep, and I've got proof he was taken from my property." Karen let out a nervous laugh. "Oh, come on. He was just wandering around. I was doing him a favor." The officer raised an eyebrow. "We also have video evidence from your own live stream where you openly admit to planning to—" Karen's face drained of color. The entire backyard had gone silent. Every single guest was awkwardly shifting away from her. Even the fancy chef who had been tending the grill was now subtly packing up his knives, wanting no part of this now. The officer continued. Notepad. "Let's talk about the multiple health violations, unregistered event hosting, and possible theft charges." Karen made a strangled noise. "Wait, I didn't. This is all being blown out of proportion." Jake took a step closer, enjoying every second of her meltdown. "Yeah, I'm sure the internet is going to be real forgiving about—" As if on cue, Karen's phone pinged with a notification. Then another, and another. She fumbled to check it, her eyes widening in horror. The screen lit up with hashtag Goatgate, thousands of comments flooding in. "Monster. Call the cops." Karen's wineglass slipped, shattering like her perfect life. Marshmallow let out a triumphant bleat, as if celebrating their victory. Jake gave him a proud pat. "Don't worry, buddy. You're going home." And as Karen's curated world collapsed around her, Jake couldn't help but think revenge had never tasted sweeter. Karen stood frozen in the middle of her backyard, gripping her phone like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Her face was a fascinating mix of disbelief, horror, and rage as she scrolled through the tidal wave of comments flooding her live stream. Each notification chipped away at her carefully curated social image, exposing her as the town villain in real time. The elegant, high-class atmosphere of her barbecue had crumbled into a disaster zone of chaos, sirens, and angry voices. Jake didn't even try to hide his amusement. He stood off to the side, Marshmallow nestled safely in his arms, watching as the destruction unfolded. Police officer in, questioning Karen, asking for permits she definitely didn't have, while the animal control officers examined Marshmallow, making notes about his condition. The protesters were still outside the fence, chanting slogans that had turned into a mix of "Save the Goat" and "Cancel Karen." And Karen's guests, sensing the ship was sinking fast, were hastily gathering their things and slipping away before they got dragged into the scandal. Karen, however, wasn't giving up so easily. With the same unearned confidence that had gotten her into this mess, She snapped out of her trance and turned to the lead officer, planting her hands on her hips like she was the one in charge. This is ridiculous. I'm the victim here. That man, she pointed aggressively at Jake, trespassed on my property. He broke into my event. He stole that goat from me. Jake snorted. You mean the goat you stole from me first? Karen ignored him. Officer, do you know who I am? I have connections, important ones. Do you really want to ruin a perfectly wonderful evening over a misunderstanding? The officer, who looked like he had exactly zero patience for her nonsense, slowly raised an eyebrow. Ma'am, I don't think you understand the situation you're in. He motioned to the animal control officer beside him. We have enough evidence to charge you with theft, animal cruelty, and multiple health and safety violations. And that's before we even get into the live stream footage where you openly admitted to planning to cook a stolen pet. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. That was taken out of context. One of the officers let out a dry chuckle. The video where you literally said, "This is going to be the best fresh farm-to-table meal ever." That context? Her face flushed bright red. I was joking. Obviously no one was actually going to eat the goat. It was all for show. Jake gave Marshmallow a scratch behind the ears. Well, that's funny because I distinctly remember you telling me I should be honored that he was going to be the star of the... Karen's frustration boiled over, and she turned on Jake, seething. You think you're so clever, don't you? Jake grinned. Not really, but I don't need to be when you're doing all the work for me. Karen let out a sharp breath, clearly trying to compose herself. She glanced around at the remaining guests, looking for support, but they were all suddenly very interested in their phones, avoiding eye contact. Even the chef who had been manning the grill was now nowhere to be seen, probably deciding that his career wasn't worth being associated with whatever this disaster had turned into. One of the officers filled out a small notepad. All right, Karen Thompson. As of now, we are issuing citations for unlawful animal possession, failure to obtain proper permits for food preparation, and hosting an unregistered public event. Karen stiffened. Citations? For now? The officer continued. But considering the overwhelming video evidence, you should probably expect a visit from a judge real soon. Karen's expression flickered with panic, but she still wasn't backing down. I'll fight this. I have lawyers. I have connections. This whole thing is being blown out of proportion. Lisa, who had been casually sipping a soda by the fence, chimed in cheerfully. Yeah, well, I don't think the internet agrees with you. Karen whipped her head toward her, glaring. What are you talking about? Lisa held up her phone. Goatgate is trending. You're already at 20,000 views. Oh, and someone turned your meltdown into a meme. She turned the screen toward Karen, where a screenshot of her shouting, "It's just a goat," had been captioned with, "When you try to barbecue the..." Jake couldn't help it, he laughed. Karen's face burned with fury. This isn't over, she hissed. Jake gave her a slow, almost pitying smile. Oh, Karen, it really is. As if to prove it, the cops handed her a folder full of citations and turned back toward their vehicles. The animal control officers, satisfied that Marshmallow was unharmed, gave Jake a nod of approval before packing up as well. The protesters, now that their mission was a success, began taking victory selfies in front of Karen's gate, celebrating their small but mighty triumph. Karen, meanwhile, stood completely still in the middle of her backyard, surrounded by the wreckage of what was supposed to be her perfect event. The once pristine white tablecloths were stained with spilled wine. Marshmallows littered the ground like tiny sugary landmines, and her carefully curated social status was going up in flames faster than the fire in her abandoned grill. Jake adjusted Marshmallow in his arms and gave Karen a final nod. Good luck cleaning this up. With that, he turned on his heel and walked toward the gate. Lisa and Timmy followed, Timmy casually tossing one last marshmallow over his shoulder like a final parting shot. As soon as they stepped back onto Jake's property, Lisa let out a victorious cheer. That was beautiful. I mean, honestly, better than I even imagined. Jake exhaled, finally letting the tension in his shoulders ease. He set Marshmallow down, and the little goat immediately began bouncing around happily, blissfully unaware of how close he had come to disaster. Lisa nudged Jake. So, how does it feel to have completely ruined Karen's social life in one night? Jake scratched his chin thoughtfully. I think I could get used to this whole hero thing. Timmy grinned, the real hero. We should get him his own Instagram. Jake smirked. You know what? That's actually not a bad idea. Lisa laughed. Oh, she's going to lose her mind if your goat ends up being more famous than she is. Jake glanced back at Karen's yard, where she was still standing motionless, staring at her phone as the full weight of her downfall settled in. "Yeah," he said with a satisfied nod. "I think that's a risk I'm willing to take." Marshmallow let out an infant bleat, and with that, Jake led his little crew back toward the barn, leaving Karen to deal with the ruins of her disastrous evening. As Marshmallow nibbled on an old rope, Jake's phone buzzed again. Karen's lawyer's number flashed across the screen. He couldn't help but smile. Let her try,